now that with new transformed learning environments, teachers are able to do the strategies on the right-hand side, and we see it every day, and we see it everywhere in the world. It's not a geographically confined activity. And we created this slide possibly on faith or on intuition or experience, but we have a tremendous amount of evidence now that says if a student can learn along the right-hand side of the chart, that they can transfer that to higher ed, into the world of work. They can show talents that we never found when we were looking at the left-hand side of the chart only. And so although most of us succeeded on the left-hand side, and sometimes you use those strategies. Sometimes those strategies are still correct strategies. But now if we can also use strategies on the right-hand side of that chart, we reach many more kids, we see different talents. You should see team leadership come out in a student when you're using some of the strategies on the right-hand side. Different skills that aren't necessarily text-based. You know, verbal reasoning is still very important, but it's not what elects your next politician. It's not what creates the next superstar. It's a more visual media. It's a more interactive media than text. And so it's necessary that we move and that we do change the student learning experience. So you're going to ask, what does that look like? I hope you're thinking, so what does that look like? Well, all of these are innovations that help move education into the digital age, into the 21st century. But I maintain that they can all be around the edges of learning. So this is not what I'm thinking about when I think about transformation or innovation at the heart of learning. These are important. They move the enterprise into the digital age. And they're very important. And you know, I can talk to lawyers or doctors or parents that have no experience in education, and they will agree that these are important innovations. When I go to the next step, they just sort of glaze over. They don't understand it. So when I talk about changing the student learning experience, then there's not a large number of people in the population that understand that. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say we need innovation at the heart of learning. First of all, what I want to see is students using the tools they use outside of the classroom. I want to see them using those for learning. So somebody just, what's one tool I might be thinking about when I say that? Cell phones, absolutely. Texting, you know, I see students doing homework, outside of school work, with their cell phones all the time. I went to vote recently in the United States, and many of our polling places are at schools. Walk into the school, big sign, no cell phones. So it's not only that we're missing a chance to engage students and to give them the power to learn with these, but it's also that we're really missing our responsibility. Obviously, how many of you would say students or children that you're engaged with, say 50% of them at least have a cell phone? You believe that's true? Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to use these, and they're going to use them in society. But if we ban them from school, are we helping them develop a solid moral compass, a solid decision-making structure around these? No. We're negligent, actually, by banning these from schools. Because part of the reason for education is to help build a student's ability to be a positive citizen in society. If we're completely banning these, then there's no chance that we're contributing to their development. And this is just one example. You know, you can look at wikis, you can look at Facebook, you can look at the social networking, social media, and we find the same thing. And I find it actually throughout the world. There are a few Scandinavian and North European countries that are being more flexible with these technologies, but many places in the world are banning them. So I want to see students using these tools for learning, and I want to see teachers being taught to develop activities that are positive, contributing activities. And developmentally, I want to see students beginning to build their own decision-making framework so that when we leave them on their own and they leave school, either just outside during the day or at the end of their formal schooling, that they can make solid decisions around these technologies as well. It's not necessarily easy, and it's not without challenges, but that's one thing I want to see. So also when students are learning a discipline or working in a discipline, I want to see them using the tools and strategies that a professional uses. So let's think about science. Can somebody think of a science tool that, that we don't see much in our schools that's pretty commonly used outside of our schools? Sensors and probes? Absolutely. That's good. So you just earned yourself one of the door prizes afterwards. So I have a good friend who just retired. He was a molecular chemist. His name was John. He retired at about 70, I think, or so, 70 years old. And so I said, so John, you're hanging up your lab coat. And he looked at me and smiled and he said, really, I'm pushing away from the workstation. He said, 90% of my time, I'm in a digital, virtual environment, and only when we get the product to act like we want it to act for our customer do we go to the lab and see if we can build it or not. So I spend about 10% of my time in lab work, and the rest of the time either interacting with other molecular chemists or interacting with the virtual system that we have for determining that. So when I go into school, I don't see either those strategies or those tools. And you think of the same thing for communications. I mean, if you stop someone on the street and say, what's your passion? And they say communications, ask them how much technology they use. If they say not very much, then they're either a teacher or a student. Because if they're working professionally in communications, they use a ton of technology. So that disconnect is not a healthy thing for our education system. Students see it rapidly as irrelevant. You know, in the U.S., for example, we have a tremendous challenge of turning out effective scientists and engineers and analytic folks because we're not teaching the current strategies with the current tools, or even the current theories in many cases are not there yet in the classroom. So certainly we want to see students work collaboratively, and we have made progress in making learning a social activity. I will say that maybe actually these have in the computer. So we may not get the credit for that, but we do see students working together tremendously now in teams and just in informal groups for learning and so forth. But I want to see that happening, and I want to see it happening in an authentic setting, like challenge-based or project-based activities. When appropriate, I want to see students accessing experts that may not even be on this continent and using the resources from there. So that's very important. And then what we, I think, maybe have not completely figured out yet are the serious games and the simulations. But when you watch students' faces and watch the way they come alive when they're interacting with those activities, that's something we have to pay attention to, and we have to figure out in the next few years, because students are going to gaming, no question. If we can make those productive and positive and serious learning games, that will help. That'll make a big difference for how we're able to motivate students. And then a big piece that I'll talk a little more about later is that your teachers modeling, as we have a set of standards that I'll talk about in a minute, but as we revise those, people told us that the most important activity a teacher may do is modeling 21st century learning and modeling 21st century work for their students and making it very transparent, very visible. That regardless of what competencies they can pass and all that, that if they don't understand a concept, they go to a learning network that's online or to colleagues, and students see them discover something they didn't know. That's a very important piece, the modeling piece is. And also that their work not look like the work looked 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So having a 21st century teacher, if you will, is also critical to my vision of changing that learning experience. If the teacher acts the same, the learning experience for the student is not going to be a great deal different. What we're seeing is a culture of co-learning. A teacher sees a student do something, and rather than saying, I won't accept that because not everybody can do it, she says, how did you do that? Would you show me and would you show the class how we did that so that we'll have the ability to do that as well? So that's co-learning from the students, but also co-learning from your colleagues and from peers. So that's part of what I see as a changed student learning experience. They're teaching part of the time, actually. And then it's assessment for learning. So often we assess, it's an assessment of learning. We see whether or not it worked. But if you can actually do assessment ongoing, and you can do the types of assessment that help the students learn. And so we need to see a lot more of that. And then of course, learning, teaching, and assessment should be social activities. We are making some progress actually with teachers as well. So we're seeing teachers form groups. We're seeing, especially a teacher that might be the only one in your school, upper level science, for example, or that they begin to form larger networks and they actually use each other's lessons and activities and gather groups to do projects together. And so we're seeing that become more social, but our assessment is nowhere. It still takes the student out of that social learning activity, puts them in a little cubicle and asks them to respond to small little tidbits of knowledge, and maybe procedural knowledge, but that's about it. We don't look at performance. We don't look at activity within a project group. We don't look at those kinds of things for assessment of student growth yet, and we should be doing that. So that's kind of begins to create a vision of what I'm thinking about when I'm talking about changing that student learning experience so that it's not such a radical change when they go into the world to work, that they actually perform similarly during their learning process. So I say that changing that student learning experience is innovation at the heart of learning. That's really my definition for it. And I would say with the tools and the strategies and the potential we have right now, shame on us if we continue to teach the way we've always taught, if we continue to act as we've always taught and always acted, and if we continue to assess the way we assess right now, then shame on us, because we have the potential to do that differently. And we see it in places. We see pockets of that being done differently. I want to talk a little bit about ISTE. I think you heard in the introduction that while technology is in our name, we're not sort of a technology standards group in terms of the technology itself. We're really a teaching and learning effectiveness group. And that's where our heart lies, and we just know that we can use technology to improve that, and that's why we do that. So we call ourselves a worldwide group of leaders. We have about 22,000 direct members. We have geographic affiliates, and it looks like there may be one applying soon in Mexico City actually as well. So stay tuned for that. But we also have corporate partners. We think that the corporate sector are legitimate partners in transforming schools. They can't overtake the agenda. You can't let one corporate entity drive the agenda. But if you don't have them involved, we're missing a tremendous resource. So we have about 65 corporate members as well. And then we have special interest groups in a number of areas, and I'll show you a couple of those later. We do very little in isolation. We partner with many organizations, many foundations, many governments, but it's all around improving schooling worldwide. These are just some of the special interest groups. We have 20 of them, really, and I couldn't list them all. Now I wish I had listed mobile learning. That's a fairly new one on the horizon as well. But some of them are by job categories, some of them are by application, some of them by teaching strategy even, or teaching arrangement. And so our members self-organize in these communities of interest. And that's one thing that makes a membership a powerful piece, is that you can access one or all 20 of these, and you become a member when you become a general member of the organization. It's been one of our strongest developments lately as people have become. They want to know the general picture. They want to know the worldwide, see the worldwide window on education and technology. But typically they have also a specific category that they want to address. And so these do learning together. They do advocacy, and so that's a piece. And what I say we really do is we network people like nobody else in the world. We do advocate for the digital learning agenda. We do thought leadership. Our standards are, I think, an example of that, and you have copies of those in the field. But we also do capacity building. So many organizations do the top three, I would say, there. But we don't see many of our colleagues in the field shoulder to shoulder or elbow to elbow with practitioners, and we're there all the time. I travel constantly. I'll be doing training on Friday here in Mexico City. It was in Bogota on Monday. We like to get, we